let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the award-winning podcast where we talk about gaining, feedism, and everything in their orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim. So let's get into it. Today we're welcoming to the show. We've got a couple of people with us. We've got Matt and Momo.
Hello both. How are we doing today?
Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm going pretty well today. I'm Matt.
Doing great. I'm Momo. Just woke up.
Well, good. I'm glad you're both doing good. You're both looking adorable and gorgeous today here on the recording. Listeners, you can't see them because this is just audio, but they look gorgeous. And when we do socials at some point afterwards, if you'd like to check them out, you can ogle goggle and drool over them at your leisure. But we're here today to talk about something I think a little bit different. We've had the pleasure of talking to civilians on the podcast before, about different things around gaining, perhaps as it pertains to them. But today we're very specifically talking about the fact that you're civilians and y'all are aware of gaining. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah? You've heard of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So really, we want to utilize this episode. The reason I say a bit different, because we really want to zoom in on the fact that y'all are civilians and are therefore outside of the community. And we're going to be talking about that because I feel like even to this day, there is still some amount of, within our community, some amount of uncertainty when it comes to the mindset of civilians regarding the subject of gaining. I think there's sometimes some real fear and concern and, I think rooted in just an expectation that people aren't going to be chill. But I know you both. You're both very chill. So I feel like you two are the perfect people to talk to about the subject. So listen, let's just get straight into it, shall we? I'd like for each of you to describe to me in your own words what you believe the gaining community to be.
Cool. I might get started. Just in my own understanding is someone who's a gainer, so they generally want to increase their body fat and their appearance. And that's kind of the simple way, but I guess people's motivations might be different, but they're all on the journey together, and it could be like a permanent weight gain or like a transient bloating thing. Generally, there's that goal for the gainer themselves to gain weight, and then there are kind of these auxiliary people who either support or I guess admire as well, that process.
For my understanding, since I'm not in the gaining world, so like everything is said today, it may be I'm not correct. Please correct me. I think that is guys who getting sexual pleasure for gaining weight, like they can get sexually aroused by force feeding, by getting bigger, and by having a belly that can wiggle. That's what I'm seeing. I think sometimes they have to go to mostly focusing on the belly part. That's what I'm seeing. And also the food part. That eating high calories food, try to build a body image that they are comfortable and proud of.
Yeah, you definitely hit the nail on the head and then drove it straight through the board and out the other side. I'm not used to civilians that know that much about us.
No, I think you both absolutely got the right idea. I was really tempted to be like, no, actually, it's a terrible nomenclature, but we're a dieting group, But no, we're very much all about the big, as you said. And as Tim said, it's refreshing that people actually know what's going on with what we do. I mean, you're absolutely right. Some of us really do enjoy force feedings. Not necessarily everyone, but I think that can be a big part of the pleasure center, especially for people who like the feeding element is relatively central. I think discerning it from other typical larger groups like, bears and chubs, gainers really are the only group who have sort of accrued mass with intention, right? Oftentimes we see in like bear and chub communities, a lot of people who occupy those spaces kind of just so happen to be larger, right? And so sometimes I think there can be a bit of a relegation element where people are a bit like, oh, well, I guess I'm a bear, I guess I'm this, so I guess I gotta go to these parties and hang out with these types of people, whereas we're sort of sat here like, no, we did this shit on purpose, we're feeling very good about it, let's, come at it from a point of joy, you know. But certainly that sex element is very much there. Like there is a sexual gratification that comes from like, oh yeah, I feel good about being larger. And you mentioned the belly several times. That is very much, I would say, the central tenet of all forms of gaining, at least as far as I've been aware of other gainers. You know, some people, if you were to say, like, are you a boob man? Are you a butt man? You know, what other kind of body parts do you like? Everyone's got their little preferences. I have yet to meet the gainer who, like, the belly was not one of the most important aspects.
If they built a shrine to it, we would all kneel in front of it and praise it.
I would probably describe Ray because one of the I think the cool things about gaining is that it's very like non-genital focused. Like obviously we can be horny and therefore the fulfillment of horniness comes from downstairs. But engaging with the downstairs is not really the point of gaining. I would argue that our sex organ of choice is the belly. That's what we like to get our hands on and get all up and around and you know all that good gay shit. We just do it up top rather than down below. So, yeah. Do you guys feel like that's a fulfillment of your expectations around gaining, or is that maybe a little bit left of the ideas you kind of had around it to start?
No, that's about right. Like what you've described from our conversations and kind of just cursory look into like the gaming community, like that, like a kink aspect to gaining. It's not like food and using that as a kind of method to enjoy sexuality between two people. So yeah, it's pretty much on the money.
So for personally, the first time here gaming is actually from you, James. That a couple of years back is the first game I've met in my life. And then since then, I've been seeing a lot of like Instagram of the gainers. So are probably from like a third person perspective, like from to know about it. And in my last couple of years, I met a few gainers and then trying to understand the mindset and the personal level. It's going to be interesting talk that I get lots of questions as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. And really, that was going to be my next question to the pair of you. It's like, how did you come to learn about gaming? I mean, we know. So, Matt, how did you come to learn about the gaming community?
So I came to learn about the gaming community through James, the host. We lived together in London for a good few years together. And I think it kind of started initially just kind of how you were talking about how you were back in Australia, your body shape, and then kind of how you are now. And then eventually a discussion came about that, oh, it's because of gaining. And that's how I came to learn about gaining as a concept and as a culture, a subculture. And it's just, yeah, that's how I came about it. And it was just really interesting because like, it's not I hadn't met anyone prior to that kind of event who was into gaining. So it was really good eye-opening and kind of good sharing moment between us.
Yeah. I can't actually remember though, like if I was the person who introduced you to the concept or if you'd like heard of it prior to that. And if so, where might you have heard of it from, if you can remember?
So I think gaining as a sexual thing and like in your kind of environment, that was specific from you. But in media, you kind of hear about feedism gainers, but they're often kind of treated with derision in like they're not sort of with as people just living their lives. They're just kind of treated as disgusting. So yeah, that's the unfortunate how you kind of learn about feeding and gaining in culture and then having this discussion where you kind of really get to understand what it actually means to people and your experience and then kind of eventually finding out little bits and pieces about others. I think that's what kind of recontextualized and made it a bit more kind of trying to find the word, but like good and
No, I mean,
yeah.
I mean, really, I think that's an important point to dig into and something we would want to talk about with today, right? Like, we exist in a political world. We don't exist in a vacuum. We're aware that our representation in the media, shall we say, is not the best. And obviously within our community, like, we know it's dishonest and that's not good, but the rest of the world doesn't know that. And really that sort of harkens back to the whole point of this podcast, is to really like unpack that and help people to understand like a lot of what we experience isn't even weird. Like it's just our processing of what we experience through our narratives. And one, understanding that for the most part, those things aren't even a problem to be unpicked. It's like, it's just our thing. So we just need to get into our thing in whatever way that manifests. But also that where we do need to do some unpacking, that there is a space with which to do that. And so, hence we have today's conversation. But you're right, it would be reminiscent of us not to reference that. I mean, Tim, you and I, over the years, have reviewed a lot of the media that
Yeah.
talks about this stuff. Um, do you?
And it's a race to the bottom for the most part.
Yeah.
It's all very exploitative. It's all very one-sided. It's all very freak show.
And a lot of the stuff in the early 2000s, like it was just like they'd be interviewing people with hand cams and they'd be doing it as like a down angle and basically like looking up at their nostrils. Like it was very weird. Like a lot of interviews where it was like, yeah, I'm going to this fetus party and I'm really looking forward to it. Like
Yeah, it really looked like that.
it's fucking weird. So, you know, that's the poor PR that that we're of nothing to count.
They must have hired Adina Monsoon as their PR person.
Yes, yes, very much. And the with the adverb reference. Um And I was curious to ask about your understanding of the process of gaining, but you know, Momo, you really encapsulated it before. You know, the process is consumption of food, weight gain results. You know, we've also got muscle gainers who are a part of our community. Those are people who tend to prioritize muscle as like a key factor in their growth. And we've also had the pleasure of talking to a number of muscle gainers over the years. They often describe that the major difference between a muscle gainer, bodybuilder, powerlifter, all this is once again, you know, it's a sexually charged element. It's a sense of personal fulfillment, gender idea, and all that stuff. But also belly tends to come into play a lot. I don't know that I've met many muscle gainers who don't also have a gut on them. It's very much that like power belly situation. You know, you think of a man who, and I don't mean to say roided up, I know there are many muscle gainers who are very intent on being natty. But you know, you can envision, right, the type of man that this resembles. Oh,
As an expert of bellies, I have a question.
oh,
That
please.
so after observing or getting more aware of the bellies part, and some bellies are more fluffy, soft, and some are harder. So do you know the reason behind?
I just assume it's genetics because that kind of always determines where the fat's going to accumulate first, and like genetics also determine skin texture. So, you know, I would think that it's kind of the lottery is like however your body begins to put on weight is how it's going to put on weight.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
sometimes I feel like you can look at certain people and predict, but then a lot of times it surprises you. And there are plenty of gainers out there who thought that they were going to gain in a certain way, and then it went maybe in a completely different direction, and they had to adjust because it wasn't what they had pictured in their head, but their body was like, well, this is where we're going with this. So if you want to get on this train, you can do it now.
yeah, it's been an interesting period of time witnessing the sort of shift in the conversations around weight and fat within the media and within a lot of these things. Certainly with the sort of advent of fat liberation being sort of made more mainstream, there's been a lot more research into the notions of why we gain weight and how it works in our bodies. And it's very interesting that over time, it's really coming more and more to the fore that like weight doesn't actually have necessarily the most to do with calories in versus calories out. It can do, especially when you are more intent and, you know, I suppose formulaic about your approach. This is weight gain or weight loss, regardless. But certainly what Tim was saying about the way that it gains on the body, there's expectations of like, oh, you have a round belly because you drink a lot of beer. You have a lot of firmness or hardness to your fat because of the visceral fat layer, which comes from overconsumption of alcohol and processed foods. And again, there is some relevancy in truth to this, but it's not necessarily a guaranteed thing. Also, fat shifts over time. Visceral fat can become subcutaneous and vice versa. So it's interesting that we all kind of have these thoughts and beliefs around fat and around how our bodies even function. But actually, because of like just a history of hating fat people and not bothering to do the research prior, it's quite interesting just how little we actually seem to firmly know about how it functions. And certainly we don't know how to fucking like quote unquote cure people of obesity because trends don't last, baby. We've been doing this shit for ever since Kellogg's had a weird like anti-sex message by eating cereal. Did either of y'all know about that?
No,
Yeah,
that's news to me. Please explain.
yeah, cornflakes was invented as a means to not masturbate, like as a
Yeah.
distraction to not masturbate. I
Yeah.
don't know how cornflakes keeps you from masturbating, but whatever.
I read this once, and by the way, this does come up in Sabrina String's Fearing the Black Body, so reminder to listeners, please go and read this book, because you'll need to know, this shit has been going on for a long time. But basically, Old Man Kellogg was like, sex is wrong and masturbation is terrible, it will send you to hell and you do deserve to die. And it's so terrible that all of our people are just masturbating and pleasuring themselves furiously. How do we prevent this? He went to his sanitarium and said, I have a solution, people. If I create this thing, I'm gonna call it cereal. It will prevent people from wanting to masturbate. And
I just don't understand what his thought process was
I believe it was something to do with like the way that the grain is processed is meant to be like maybe the act of chewing or the processing of the.
there. And did I miss the great masturbation plague of whatever year he invented cornflakes? Because I don't remember reading about a masturbation problem in the nation.
I know you were alive during the 1800s, but I think back then.
Well, but you can't go by me. I jack off 8 times a day, so it doesn't really matter. Like, I mean, I was always like not the control group.
No,
So
I mean, look, in my experience.
I was the wily one living out in the woods. Like,
In my experience, the church's and the religious' approach to being anti-sex is generally just kind of rooted in like suspicion and fear as general topic. So I think it was mostly that. But also, I think after it didn't work, they were just like, oh, well, this still works and makes us money. So there you go. The more you know about Kellogg's, you'll think about
well, thank you for that. Now explain to me why they used to put cocaine in Coca-Cola.
because we didn't used to think that cocaine was bad, girl. Now, I would be curious to ask the pair of you. Obviously, knowing you both, talked about gaining, you're aware of the concept. I would be curious to know, do you feel like your knowledge of gaining has influenced either of you at all in your daily lives?
I guess like it's not something that I think about specifically, but I guess it kind of set me on a journey of accepting my own body. It's like it's something I've always, I guess, struggled with self-image for quite a bit, like even as a kid. So understanding that there are this subgroup of gaining who are in a way deliberately subverting like that kind of cultural norm of thinness, and it was kind of set that seed where I can get to a point of body neutrality in myself, where I can accept like there are parts that I love and parts I don't, but overall like I'm neutral about how I feel, and that's okay.
For me, like I've been in the bear world for quite a bit of time, like 5, 6 years. And as an Asian born and raised in Asia, so being bigger is actually quite negative connotated. And actually, I would say that in the bear world, that they have like muscle bear, they have chops, and then normally the chops is still being looking differently in the bear community. I was in Taipei Pride back in October. There's like a guy getting a bit bigger, normally like a regular chubby guys in the US, in the European standard, but it was drawing a lot of attention that people looking at him. I was thinking about the body image in Asian culture and in the European or American culture is quite different. So in the Asian culture, if people getting a bit bigger, they call it as pig, P-I-G, pig. Yeah, it's a very negative connotated word, a label. Whereas pig in the European gay culture or American gay culture, it means sneezy, meaning open-minded. So like, it's very different that the word pig actually different in different culture. But knowing more about gainer, so I just sense the diversity in the gay community that people have different kind of fetishes, have different kind of way to enjoy their own life. So like some people into leather, some into rubber, some into like top play. And I feel that for gaining, it's just another fetish in a gay world that, well, it's nothing harm to other people. So like, why not letting people do it?
You know, we spoke to you previously the thought of, oh, we would look at some stage to try and interview some more gayners from around the East Asian and Southeast Asian region. And you and I were talking about this, and you'd expressed like, there may not even be that sense of division there, because the idea of body positivity and sort of self-reflection and love within the bear space is even that still so relatively new in some ways in Southeast Asia. That's just the nature of being in the world. Not everything is happening the same way in all places. Matt, I know you've done a lot of traveling over the years. Like when you think about being broadly gay in different countries around the world as you've traveled, have you always felt an ability to kind of just be comfortable in your body in gay spaces around the world? Or has it been a little bit touch and go in different places?
Hmm, that's an interesting one. I've got a septum ring, which is a visible signifier that I'm obviously queer. And I've had that since about 2017. And it's funny that the place where I feel, I guess, the most judged for being queer is Australia. Like you always get the old man kind of staring at you. Whereas traveling abroad, like, and even living in London, unless I was doing overtly like queer acts, like holding or kissing another man, I wouldn't generally even have a problem, whether it be like Europe or Asia, like to travel through there quite a bit. And yeah, didn't really feel too much judgment. Like I think it was more that I was a white person in the sea of Asian people, and like I'm the outsider. So kind of instead considered more like that rather than a queer person. So, but I guess it's also because I'm quite masculine presenting, so I guess that kind of allows me to kind of fly through a little bit, kind of have a little bit of body fat on me, but I'm not like I kind of pass a lot of cultural beauty standards, so I guess I kind of just fly through. So yeah, it hasn't really affected me much. It's just yeah, mostly being here in Australia where it's kind of I've noticed a bit more.
Until I walked into your bedroom that one time, and then I was actively homophobic towards you. But that's because a sock of yours had bit me, and I didn't feel safe.
Or even beating you with that and he's still there. That was pretty hilarious.
What? Oh my God. That was ridiculous. Oh my gosh. For context, listeners, as Matt has expressed, he and I used to be housemates, and there was a time when he had like a giant 10-inch still. Like, Tim, you'd know this. You know a lot of like old gay things. There was like a movie in the 90s or early 2000s with like three white guys who got kicked out of a fraternity, and so they were dressed up as girls to try and get into a sorority.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
And there's like a scene towards the end where two of the guys, still in bad drag, are fighting one another. And for some reason, in this sorority, in the hallway, in like an umbrella stand, they just had like a bunch of gigantic dildos that they were like thwacking each other with. Matt had one of those. I didn't. So I was just kind of the victim of his relentless beatings. Um, and I remember we had
You're
a
squealing so much.
we were squealing so much on the stair that one of the housemates had texted into the chat, had asked us to stop having sex in the hallway and allow people to go to sleep. And you and I were both like, what are you on about? We're just... And then we realized it was like 12:30 at night. And we were like, oh shit, sorry everyone. We were just being silly. So, I think for the duration of the time that we lived together, there was therefore a suspicion that you and I were just like, one, hooking up, but also that two, they were like, is this what the gays do? Do they just whip it out and do this on the stairwell in the share houses?
No shame.
Absolutely no shame. Yes, I think that is the case for some people. I think they absolutely do that. But no, not in the case of Matt and myself. Just a lot of playful ribbing, really. But to bring it to bring it around to gaming specifically, I'd like to ask of you both, when you were first introduced to the concept of gaming, what would you say were your initial questions, things that you were the most curious to know about? And then fast forward through to today, do you still have questions about gaming? And if so, what are the questions?
So, James, you're the first gamer I met. And then at that time, I was very curious about the mentality, the mindset of putting weight on yourself. Because as in Asian culture, it's like having a right BMI index is what you go for. So back when you're like in a primary school, you have to go to the health center to have a medical check. And they always calculate your BMI index to make sure you're on the graphs, is on the range in between that. The reason I want to meet you at that time, like 2-3 years ago, is because like, why someone want to get a heavier weight in our education, that heavier weight relates to lots of disability, lots of illnesses like diabetes related to of like cholesterol level and those kind of things. So that's why the reason I want to meet you is like understanding your mindset behind that. And I remember by the time we met that we talked about, apart from the physical health, mental health for a person is very important. And it's quite strike me that we can easily quantify for the numbers, because the weight is a number, the height is a number, whereas for which represent your physical wellness, kind of. But for the mental health, is not something that we can put a number on. About your confidence level, about your happiness, that's something you cannot put on. So like, I'm still having a think now about what is the pros and cons of the gaming journey on that. So far, meeting more people, that what I concern or what is in my head all the time is still the health of a person going through that. Yeah.
I guess for myself, I don't know if I asked too many questions at the start, because I guess I was just processing. Like, it made sense when you explained it and how you're feeling and why you went through your journey, James. But I guess I was just also processing in the context of my own kind of, I guess, unlearning a lot of the baggage, like that fat is ugly.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just a lot of kind of processing that, and like people actively seeking it, which made sense. But I just, yeah, culturally, like it was seen as like a no-no. So I don't think I asked a lot of questions back then. I was just kind of really curious whenever you were speaking about it, kind of understanding your experience, and then if anything kind of like Dana related came up in my kind of like social media, like we'd probably talk about it, like the noodles and beef stuff and things like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it, as I mentioned earlier, yeah, it just started that journey of kind of reflecting my values, and like, and even now, like I get statuses from on my Facebook of just, I remember one that came up recently that was like strong is healthy, of this and the background was a woman who was fit, and this was like back in 2010, and I think about now, ew, that's just cringe, because there are people who are like of different body types, and very a shaming message. And like, so yeah, it's just going through that journey and kind of processing and kind of getting to this point now where I'd be like more accepting of different body types, and try and be a better friend in person. But I do have just a curiosity, because like, how do you know what your ideal size is? Like I know myself, like I'm gaining, like trying to gain muscle, and like I'm working towards a marathon and like trying to set an arbitrary target. But like, what about you guys? Like, and I guess the gainer community in general, like what's your target? Do you set one?
I mean, every gainer kind of has a different idea of how they want to look as they gain, and hopefully their body is matching what they have pictured. But as far as like a goal, like the goalpost has kind of moved. Like when I first came into the community and was becoming active in it, 300 pounds was a really big milestone. Like a lot of guys celebrated reaching 300 pounds. The goalpost has moved a bit. Now it's 400 pounds is a huge milestone. So, and I feel like that goalpost moved within a span of 10 years. So 10 years from now, the post could be moved to 500. And I don't dream about being super big. I really don't. But I do dream about being a bigger man. And I feel like it would settle somewhere between the 300 and 350 range.
First of all, I like what you both had to say, and Momo, that point on health. Health is, I think, really a big conversation point that people like to bring up. There's a lot of conversation these days around, I'll say, the importance of health as a central focus. Because I think a lot of people express an idea that health is the most important thing. Health is very important. And I don't necessarily disagree with that, because ultimately what we consider health is simply your ability to function comfortably in your body, in the world, right? And we can, I think, very firmly acknowledge that, first of all, access to health needs and all sorts is different country to country. But also, as we've explored before with conversations on disability and disability access, your access to the world drops very, very quickly when you don't have it, So it is a point to consider, certainly for people who might want to reach certain sizes and approach gaining in a certain way. But I suppose to answer your point on health, that really is ultimately something that each of us does have to unpack. When I first began my gaining journey, I was 100 pounds or 45 kilos, right? And I'd lived my whole life as a skinny person. So, in order for me to think, well, what does it mean to become a fat person, or even just a large person in general, I have to begin to unpack my relationship with food, my thoughts on health, and I have to answer some very challenging questions at times around, if I gain and pursue this, and then it were to result in, let's say a diabetes diagnosis, or if it were to result in, a shift in my blood pressure, how do I navigate that? Do I feel comfortable, being put on medication or taking insulin regularly? And it is important that gainers are very honest with themselves about those topics, because ultimately your health is your own. No one else can make decisions on it for you. You need to be aware of your actions, and if you truly are at peace with those things. I've asked myself those things. I know where I sit. Tim, I know you're the same, and I know many other gainers are. But it's a good point to bring up. Everyone's journey is their own. And I suppose, Matt, to answer your current question, much like Tim had said, how do you know when you are in the body that's right for you? For me, it is very much feeling my way. Because as I expressed, I've never been fat, so I don't know what size is going to feel right for me as I achieve it. But certainly, I've grown over the years, even in the time that I've known you, and I do take time in each sort of phase to look at myself, be very familiar with myself, love on myself, feel good about what I've done. And I think it's through that process of centering positivity and joy and feeling of success and all that good stuff, then I'm able to discern the difference between, I feel good and I could also gain more and feel good about that, versus I think what a lot of people end up feeling with typical weight loss, which is I lost weight because I'm not satisfied with my body, and now I've lost weight and now I'm in a smaller body and I still don't feel like I'm thin enough. I don't feel like I've achieved what I need to. Which, newsflash to anyone who hasn't had that realization yet, it's because you haven't learned to be okay with yourself in your body, period. And again, this is the major difference between gaining and I think a lot of other approaches to body. I don't become fat because I hate my thin self. I become fat because I love myself, and I know that I want to love on my fatter self and celebrate myself and celebrate life at a size that I know is more in alignment with me. It similarly can happen with weight loss, I think. You know, we don't necessarily talk about that all the time, obviously. But I think if you're losing weight because you love yourself and you go, I know that I'm just not happy with this and I want something that is smaller, I think that's fine. But again, I think there's that difference. Like if you lose weight and then you go, I'm not feeling the best about this, that's where I think people need to be a little bit more honest with themselves. Like, what are your motivations for shifting your body? Is it rooted in love and the acclamation of, you know, joy and the thing that is right for you? Or is it because you are not treating yourself with kindness, you know?
I have a question.
Go for it.
Now seeing more Instagram posts about the journey of gaining, for so many guys who love to see the change, transformation from that. So apart from the typical one eating food on Instagram, also juggling their belly, and sometimes I see them trying to do push-up or sit-up, which they are able to do when they are in a slimmer body, and not getting bigger is not able to do it, and they kind of getting happy about it. To more extreme, some guys even want to get into very bigger shape that is closer to immobility. So like, how do you see this culture of gaining displaying this kind of like, I'm not sure it's like sexual arousal or whatever it is, that getting pleasure in this kind of inability?
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, so yeah, it's a very common, I guess, sub fetish or I hate to say trope, because trope has to do with literature, but I'm tired and I can't think of another word. But it's a common thread with gainers to find it erotic that they can't do things that they used to be able to do when they were skinny. And that's like a confirmation of just how big they've gotten and how much they've transformed to the point where it has debilitated them a bit. And it's kind of hot to know that, like, it's like when you can't fit into your old clothes anymore. It's, you know, that your body has been altered from, you know, what it was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And like, we can look back at pictures of ourselves and not recognize ourselves at those sizes. And it's, I don't know, maybe it creates an uncanny valley. Maybe it creates a bit of cognitive dissonance, but I don't know, it's just something that really, I think, feeds that instant gratification that all humans need, you know, because we all need that. Like we all crave it regardless of our patience level. So yeah, I can't really articulate more than that.
But also the knowledge of like affirming your identity and testing the limits of what you do. I think it's a very common human trait, you know, because I think much like the notion of imagination and creativity, if you say to a person, hey, draw me anything, the person will blank and they'll go, well, I don't know what to draw. You just said anything. I could draw anything. It's too many options. You've actually kind of blown my mind in terms of like, I can't, there's no framework to base it off of. Whereas if you said to someone, oh, draw me a picture of a house, bet. I know exactly what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it, you know? So sometimes boundary and constraint helps us to contextualize ourselves. Much like Tim was saying, you know, it's an affirmation of the size we've grown to. But it is also a beautiful thing, I think, to rediscover your body through the lens of a life choice that you feel at peace with. For me, it is very affirming, I'll put it out there, anytime I'm in the shower and I am having the opportunity to wash myself and my hands are going all over my body, and there is an inevitable point in the showering where I find myself pulling and grabbing at non-genital parts of my body that are now different than what they were when I was thinner. And it's a wonderful opportunity just to luxuriate, love on my body and be like, I feel so good. I feel so good touching myself because I love this. So we all have our ways, I think, that affirm who we are in our bodies. We talked a little bit before about the negatives that the world tends to present about gaining. But I'd actually like to put this to you all, let's say, in a dating context. Paint the scene. Each of you have encountered a lovely gentleman. You are quite smitten. You think he's wonderful. and you decided, okay, I'm ready to call this man my boo thang boyfriend and move forward with that. And you find out through conversation he is a gainer. In dating this person, do you think that would challenge you where you are right now with your approach to body? Or do you feel like you would be able to enmesh yourself with this person without a lot of friction? What do you think?
So for me, I would think that me as a person who love to go travel, who love to explore the world, that it sometimes require quite a bit of walking. I like outdoor sport as well. Like I hike Air Force Base Camp and stuff like that. So like I really want a partner that who can explore the world with me. And if her or his skating journey is actually an obstacle in exploring the world, that you got tired after like walking for 10-15 minutes, it may be pose a big obstacle, a challenge on this. That because I do have a personal experience that I was like hanging out with a gainer, and then we were walking for a couple hundred of steps, and then he feel exhausted, feel like difficult to keep going. So like if this is an obstacle for me, it will be posing a lot of conflict in going to the world together because I need seeing the world, like to go places, and sometimes it's not accessible by car or accessible by like cable car to top of the hill. So this is my thinking is in, yeah, so about spending time together, not only at home, eating or feeding. Like for that, I enjoy the pleasure of it, but at the same time, there's more outside from home that it requires some fitness, requires some surgical physique in doing it. Sometimes I do imagine that if my partner getting very big, that couldn't even sit in a plane. So in that aspect, how can we see the world? This is what my thinking process goes.
And it's probably a point to reference here. Not every gainer necessarily wants to be to the size of mobility impediment, shall we say. We happen to know a lot of gainers who, for them, they hit the sort of 200-pound, 100-kilo mark, and they were like, this is what I wanted. I wanted to be overweight, chubby, plump, not necessarily super fat or clinically obese, So I think there's certainly something to consider there, that you may yet encounter someone who might still be in alignment with that. But you raise a very good point. Wanting to be with someone means wanting to be with that person for who they are. Someone who would be interested in you should therefore want to meet you where you're at as well, with your desires of the world, to travel, to be hiking and doing all of these things. So I don't see that as a negative thing. I think a firmness in conversation, you're starting to get to know someone and they're like, oh, this is what I want to do. And you can be honest with them and say, being honest, that's not really in alignment for me. I totally appreciate that's what you want to do, but this is my intention. I want to go out into the world and see these things. Do you think that that would be a problem for you? And I think that there would definitely be gainers who would look at that and say, no, that's fine. Do a bit of both. Find the happy medium that works. Other people might say no, and that's okay. But I think you raise a very good point. Owning your sense of what you want to do with yourself and not compromising that for the person that you're with.
For me, that is a bit complex. Like knowing more about myself now, like I think the only time I've ever had food play in sex was with my first partner, and he licked whipped cream off my asshole, and I didn't really feel anything towards it. But I know for myself that I feel like if there's my hands are dirty, if my feet are dirty, if my body is dirty from like grime or salt or fat grease or anything like that, that's something that I hyper fixate on until I can wash. So just engaging in food play would not be something I would enjoy, for example. And then I struggle with food. If I know there's sweet treats in the house, I will binge it. If there's good tasty food, I'll binge. So just even that thought of of food being around the house, that is typically used to gaining, that might kind of upset my equilibrium as well. So in terms of the gaining aspect itself and engaging in sexual play. It may not be something that I would be able to participate in, but I would be able to understand in my partner if that's something that they would. At the moment, I've got more interest in the bank than in romantic partners, so it's hard to say definitively. But I am open. Like if my partner was like we were keen to stick it through, like potentially an open relationship. Like I can't serve that need for him, so we can serve needs in other ways. Maybe that he can go off somewhere else to kind of satiate that gainer desire. So yeah, it's really hard to definitively say like where I would be. Like as long as we share the same values and like goals and aspirations, I guess we could work on it.
I love that. I mean, again, as a bit of a clarifier, not every gainer wants to do food play. Because honestly, the way you were saying that, like, you hyperfixate on like the feeling of like the stickiness or the grit. I'm the exact same way. I've had the pleasure of being fed a number of times, which can be very intimate, I think, if that's something that you enjoy. But I've also encountered plenty of guys who think that, they've spent so much money on like treats and deliciousness. And they're like, I'm going to cram it into your face hole and like get it all messy, yada, yada, yada. I'm like, that's not for me. That's not my ministry. That's not the church that I attend. For me, especially if I've paid money on the food, it's like I paid money on this food with the intention that it goes in here, not acts as a facial cleanser. I have moisturizer for that. Some gamers enjoy it, and there's certainly no shade towards that. And in a way that actually points to one of the beautiful things about gaining and feedism is that there really are so many different reasons and methods. There's so many different motivations and ideas that people can just kind of get into, and it really is different strokes for different folks, literally and figuratively. But you mentioned the potential of being in an open relationship. Tim and myself are both in open relationships with civilian men, and what you said there, the knowledge and acknowledgement of not being able to meet your partner's needs is also very real. Sometimes I feel like in relationships, there really is this sort of like cishet obligation that goes on where it's like, you must do this, and if you don't, you're a bad person. Like, mate, I don't want to fucking do the things that I don't want to do. I'm in my 30s. I don't want to go and do the things that I don't want to do. I'm tired. My feet hurt. Politically, we exist in a world where there is a lot of bullshit going on. I don't have time. I don't have the energy. And frankly, I just don't want to. That is something that a lot of gainers consider, the idea of being in an open relationship. And it comes up oftentimes in gainer conversations, right, Tim? This idea of, well, how do I find a partner in the community? And I do see the logic. Being with someone who is co-mutual with your sexual preferences. But I also think that acknowledges the fact that sex and romance are two different things. But I want to say thank you as well at this stage for the pair of you for having had this conversation. I want to put it to you both. What do you feel, if any, do you feel like anything has gone unsaid in this conversation? Or are there any aspects of what you know or suspect about gaining and feedism that haven't been talked about that you'd like to bring up before we begin to close out?
While thinking about gaming is starting to think about more about notion of food. So it's very quite different between people now. Like if for people who are more poor, it's for survival, to have energy. For people would be for pleasure, for the taste, enjoying the taste of food. And knowing about the gainer community is another use or notion of food that is to get calories. That I do encounter gainers that would eat things that it would love calories. And it was quite different than last week. I was with a guy that he was looking at the label and then want to make sure that is eating less calories so he can slim down. So like food has been getting more and more notions now when I was learning more about the gaining community.
Even if you guys wouldn't necessarily end up with a gainer at some point because we are kind of a smaller population, how do you feel about like just being with a larger man in general? I mean, I don't know how to ask this without asking, do you find fat disgusting? But it's like, I'm so used to American gay male bar culture, which is extremely toxic and very, very shallow. And I'm very, very used to pretty gay men saying things like, oh, yeah, I would have fucked him, but look at how fat he got. Or like, oh, I used to mess around with that guy. God, he put on so much fucking weight, so fucking chubby now. Like, how do you, I guess a better question would be is like when you're out and about in gay spaces and you hear stuff like that, what does that do for like what was that what's your reaction to
As in the gay community, appearance and instinct is something is rooted within us. As we, how much you want to be appreciation at different body type, appreciation of things, but actually your sexual desire is rooted in the gay community, in the gay culture, I would say. That even someone being very friendly or nice to gainer, there's like, oh, appreciate this, but maybe deep rooted inside them, they still don't want to have any sexual encounter with the gainers. So like is yeah, I think it does giving a lot of emotions to a bigger people that even people nice to you is still self-hesitating. Is that being friendly or if they are very sexually attracted to you. So like, yeah, I think it's the same for different body type as well. Some people are into twinks, so like, so or some people are into leather, or just like I think. But however, it does say that like people have more opinion on bigger people. I'm not necessarily get attracted to chubby guys, but at the same time, I do enjoy and hang out with bears. So like most of my friends are bears. So yeah, it's even within the bear community, I would say there is a bit of it's not called homophobic. What is that called? I don't know what they call that phobia. I think things of phobia is still deep rooted in people personal headspace. So like if you don't speak it out, it's still within themselves sometimes. So yeah, so I'm not sure how we can appreciate this more. It's more exposure. It's like as being Asian as well. Like so some people don't talk about race in public, but within themselves, there's still kind of like microaggression or some kind of mindset within themselves. That yeah, it's more about exposure. The more you see, the more you appreciate different people are, no matter body size or race.
This is a couple of things there. Like in for the groups that queer groups that I run in, like kind of mingling, they tend to be on the bigger side. Like for example, wearing my XXL shirt from I used to work in a bear bar back in London with James. I had a lot of bear friends in Melbourne and would often go to the Laird there for quiz nights. And so like I wouldn't often kind of associate with like the kind of more like muscle thin gay. So I don't tend to hear those comments of, oh, they used to be skinny, but now they're fat, and like that kind of gross kind of description of other people's bodies, other gay men's bodies in a romantic or even social sense. So I haven't, thankfully, don't hear that much. But I'm not discounting that it does happen. It's just because I've been in the groups that are more plus size, they kind of are more accepting of that. But in terms of my own dating, like it's like I've been with guys of different body shapes and ethnicities and heights and all that. So it's really hard to say like I'm not going to instantly discount someone who's a gainer or even on the heavier side. Like I'm not, but I'm just typically a sucker for someone with a pretty face and a good personality, and can kind of work from there.
But, I think this is a good place to begin to round out the conversation. I think, Momo, a lot of what you were saying there about the visibility is really crucial. And again, your Asianness, your plus-sizedness, your queerness, all of that are very, very important things to uplift and celebrate. And, I really do hope we get to see more of that as time goes on. And, should I ever have the pleasure of coming to Thailand, girlie, I'm going to be crashing on your couch. And, you got to introduce me
I
to,
got two rooms.
yes, ma'am, another room. Thank you. I've been living in London far too long. I'm like, oh, a room someone could live in and you're not like making money off of it? It's impossible here. Also, I still can't get over the fact that like the bear club night that happens in Bangkok is called Club Diet.
So the first time I went there, I was like, it's very oxymoron. It's like a bear bar and called itself a diet. And when I asked the owner why come up with that name, basically they said that it's because diet means eating, which the English level. So like just the understanding of English means eating. Diet means eating. We're providing food in the bar.
Oh, so he was like, "Oh, diet's one of them English words where they're talking about eating, and these are big boys, so it's great."
Remember the logo of like a chubby boy eating with the word diet? Remember the logo?
Yeah, campus tits. Oh my God, I must. Well, Tim, when you and I do Thailand, we'll have to go and pay a visit to Club Diet. But no, this has been a really wonderful conversation. Thank you, boys.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Thank you both again. Where can our listeners find each of you online?
Cool. So you can find me on my Instagram, xarpical. Xarpical.
So for me, you can find me my Instagram, and I'll put it on the show notes.
Fabulous. Well, y'all, that's a wrap for now here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. If you liked this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BlueSky at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at ThiccMouse. You can also look us up on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Thicc Radio, or at our website at podpage.com/Thicc Radio. If you want to submit a voice note or become a financial supporter of the show, you can find the links in the show notes. You can always write to us at theThiccRadio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye,
Bye,
Fats.
Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Enter app podcast produced by Stan and Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by Spotify.